Founders, are the tariffs that were announced last week coming for you too? Find out next on This Has to Work. All right, Kelly. So tariffs announced last week. By the time somebody watches this, it will have been last week. Little insider trick. We're recording it the week that it actually got announced. So this may or may not age well. But pretty sweeping tariffs across the board. And it feels a little bit negligent not to actually talk about it in the broader sense, and then maybe a little bit more specific to kind of small business owners, entrepreneurs, founders, and things like that. So I don't think that founders are prepared to kind of live in this like Trump tariff world that has been created, or am I just wrong?
No, I don't think they are. I don't think any of us really are. And I think you're right. This is something that we need to talk about, and not to insult anyone's intelligence, but I think we learned that a lot of folks don't understand tariffs and how they work. So, Matthew Hoddle, what are tariffs and how do they work?
Yeah, here's my armchair economist role that I'm going to play, but some of it is very simple. So I'm going to try to keep this apolitical. I know that's going to sound hard, but the reality is that these tariffs were put in place by the current administration. The current administration happens to be the Trump administration. The Trump administration happens to be a Republican administration. Whether I agree with that political ideology or not is outside of this. So I'm going to stick just to the facts of what this is. So tariffs are a tax. They're placed on foreign products imported into a country.
Boom.
Right off the bat. Most tariffs are calculated as a percentage of the total cost or the purchase price. And most countries have them in some way, or shape, or form. Tariffs are paid by the importer, not the country of origin. And those products that the tariffs were paid, that tariff was paid on by that importer is usually baked into their input costs, and those input costs get passed on to consumers. So I think that's the really important part, because you hear both sides of that, and one of them is right and one of them is not. Never in the history of foreign trade has a foreign country written a check from its treasury to our U.S. Treasury. That's not how it works.
Never in the history of historydom is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so importers have to mark the prices up because they're having to pay that.
Right.
Maybe they don't mark it up the full amount. Maybe they eat some of that into their profit margin.
Right.
But that's not usually what happens. Ultimately, tariffs are a pass-through to the buyer or the consumer. So whether it's a wholesale buyer that's buying a container worth of product, or it's an individual consumer that got something off of Temu, right? That doesn't fall in the de minimis kind of category of it's too cheap to even charge tariffs on. And again, tariffs are never paid by the country of origin. That's my armchair economist definition of tariffs and what they are. Just a quick time out to ask you if you'd please hit that subscribe button. 88% of people who watch our videos are not subscribed to our channel. So if you want the latest on startup news, technology, innovation, or even just business discussions, click that subscribe button. Promise to give you some good content. One long form video a week and several shorts along the way. Hit that subscribe button. Help us reach our goal of 5 new subscribers every single week. Thanks so much.
Okay. So now that we understand what tariffs are, let's talk a little bit about how the small business impact of these tariffs, right? So I want to just talk through which industries either can be hit the hardest, and going beyond the obvious stuff. So what sneaky problems should business owners watch for? Is it support delays? Is it contract issues? What do these small businesses have to be on guard about?
Yeah, so tariffs affect the entire economy throughout the entire supply chain, throughout the entire value creation. So dust off your old business school or 101 books about how, the value chain and how that's created within products and manufacturing. Suffice to say that if your input costs, meaning the cost of the things to make goods or services, deliver services, sell services, if those prices are going up, then the prices, the output price or the sales price has to go up.
Right.
For a small business, which startups are most certainly, the impact to them is exponential. If you think about it, small businesses are the most vulnerable business models in any economy, right?
Right.
It can't absorb shocks like a big company can.
Right.
It can't just open up a new factory in the US if it's getting all of its products from a third party in Indonesia or Vietnam or China or whatever the case may be. So they're really vulnerable to shifting input costs.
Yeah.
The other thing too is if the cost of living goes up because consumer purchasing power goes down, meaning in simplest terms, everything just gets more expensive, your dollar doesn't go as far.
Right.
Well, then guess what? You have to pay them more. And if you want to retain that talent, you're now in a war for those wages, and those wages are going up. So not only are your input costs going up, but your wages are going up because people need more money because their cost of living went up because their purchasing power went down. Now let's talk about retaliatory tariffs.
Yeah.
So if you export any of your products, and here's a note, and this is something that I actually learned recently, which is it's not just products, it's also services.
Let's talk about that, because I think some startups that are tech driven think that this won't impact them because they're not creating physical products. So let's dig in there.
Yeah, for sure. So imagine that you're selling a product that's cloud-based. Well, technically that could be tariffed by a country in which the user is now sitting accessing your cloud-based service. It's crazy to think, but that can happen. And so if the US puts 10% tariffs on a country, then that country is probably going to retaliate with the same reciprocal tariff on our stuff. So now the stuff that you're having to come in, you're paying more on. The people who are now buying your product have to pay more for your product in order to use it, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
And that will be basically passed on to the end user in one way, shape, or form. Whether it's through a third party or it's directly, they're going to have to pay it. So input costs go up, output costs go up, wages are going to go up. Because they have to, because of this whole intra-connected economy that we operate in.
So one of the arguments is it's going to be bad. It's going to be hard. Just hold on, gird your loins, right? And for small businesses, that may not be possible. Let's be objective. What are we trying to do with these tariffs? And is it worth holding on? What are we trying to do? What are we trying to accomplish?
Such a loaded question because I really don't know.
Yeah.
Because the pro tariff argument is if foreign products become more expensive, then we will produce more products domestically so that those tariffs don't apply. Here's the problem. We don't actually have excess manufacturing capacity.
Right.
We don't have a bunch of idle factories and idle factory workers sitting around waiting to produce more products that are now more competitive because their foreign counterparts are being tariffed. That's not actually how the world works. So let's just say that even if that was the case, you've got the ramp up time of getting that manufacturing online, that production online, then the supply chain to support it and everything down the line. So let's take, for example, Ford's F-150 pickup truck, still the most popular pickup truck, I believe, in North America from a sales perspective. They have parts and assemblies that come from Canada. They have parts and assembly that come from other places.
Right.
If you're telling me that they now have to get those parts from a supplier that doesn't exist in the United States, then those parts are going up by whatever percentage of tariff has been applied to products coming over the border from Canada, including car parts.
Yeah.
Conversely, you're telling a Canadian company that it has to move to the United States and open shop there if it wants to continue to be the supplier and not have those tariffs.
Yeah.
The reality is that's probably not going to happen because once they start paying taxes and going back and forth and all of those things, it just may not be worth it anymore.
Right.
So this idea that we have idle capacity sitting around just isn't the case. So that's kind of argument number one. Argument number two is it's about fairness. And this one just sounds like the argument your toddler made to you at some point in time about how, you know, the cookie that they had broke in half and somehow that makes it less valuable than a cookie that hadn't broken in half, and how the world is so unfair and all this. I just don't, the argument is silly, right?
Yeah.
What's about fair or unfair? And they specifically are talking about this trade imbalance.
Right.
Okay, fine. But I had somebody, I read something recently that I thought was really interesting online. They used the example, they go, okay, I have a trade imbalance with a woman that I hire to do my dry cleaning. She has the materials, she has the know-how, and she has the efficiency to be able to do that I can't do for myself.
Correct.
Okay?
Yeah.
And in the time that I'm saving, not trying to figure that out for myself, I'm working as a financial advisor at 1,000 times the hourly rate that she's charging me for spending that time. So my time has now been transported from trying to figure out how to dry clean a suit into I'm working with a client that produces 1,000 times the revenue per hour that she charges me for that suit. So I have a trade imbalance.
Right.
It's not a bad deal.
Right.
It's not unfair, right? It's a better way of doing it. I'll give another example. I've heard people talk about the 700% tariff that Japan puts on imported rice from the United States, and how that screws over people in Arkansas or whatever, the rice producers in Arkansas.
Okay.
There's a problem with that argument. A couple problems with that argument. Number one, the 700% tariff only goes into effect if they import over a certain amount. Okay.
Okay.
Until they have imported that amount, it's zero.
Okay. I
There's
did not know that.
no tariff on it.
Gotcha.
And historically speaking, the import into Japan from the United States has only ever been 50% of that allocation.
Okay.
We've never even flirted with hitting that limit where a 700% tariff would come in. So people are not being honest about this,
Yeah.
or they're not being educated about this to understand that some of these trade imbalances don't even exist.
Yeah. So where does that leave small businesses, right? So what are the survival strategies? Is it finding local suppliers? Is it switching materials? Like, what are small businesses to do in this climate when effectively they are collateral damage?
Good question. I mean, I think part of it is, can you do without some of these things that are super expensive? That's number one. Can you onshore?
Yeah.
Can you find other ways of getting that product or that service from a domestic supplier, right? And that's the answer that the pro-tariff folks want you to take, right? That's what they want you to do. They want you to onshore. They want you to get more things domestically. They want more domestic production, and they want that to increase. The other thing is general austerity. Everything is going to get more expensive.
Yeah.
Can you do without certain things? Sorry, but Taco Tuesday catering may just not be on the menu.
You mean no more T-shirts?
No more T-shirts. No more stickers, right? No more catered lunches. You might have to share a couple digital subscriptions to trade publications.
Yeah.
Honestly, there is a argument to be made about austerity, because at some point in time, this will absolutely have an effect on things like venture capital and investing, because as the economy contracts, so do those asset classes. Not immediately, right? And maybe not directly, but like we talked about before, this is so interconnected. So startups, small businesses, they should be capitally efficient. They should be really looking for those opportunities to go without wherever they can go without, to kind of weather the storm. And then hopefully at some point in time, enough people, I don't know, shake some sense into some folks that are making these policies.
I want to pull on the venture capital thread a little bit more, and what that can look like and feel like for founders. So are we saying that it's going to feel like what 2020 through 2022 felt like?
Might be worse.
Might be worse.
So not to be an alarmist, but you got to think about it. There is something called the denominator effect. And I'm sorry, I'm going to nerd out for just a second here. But the denominator effect is a simple calculation that large pension programs, endowments, even institutional investors use. And one number is effectively the public securities, and one number is the venture capital, private, high risk category, right?
Okay.
Whatever that ends up meaning. So if you are CalPERS, which is one of the largest participants of venture capital, that's the entire retirement system for California. It's billions of dollars worth of AUM. When the public markets start to sink, it makes the calculation fall out of tolerance, meaning that you have too much money relative in venture capital relative to the value of your public holdings when the stock market goes down.
Yeah.
Bad news, stock market is down pretty much every indice somewhere between 3 and 8% 2 days in a row. That denominator effect is gonna kick in at some point, right? And the other part of it too is that you look at when people have any kind of extra cash, that extra cash for investing tends to go more towards the private sector than it does the public securities. Theoretically, if you have a lot of money on your balance sheet as a corporation or even just as an individual, you have a ton of assets, your public securities are well taken care of. You've got your 401ks, your retirement accounts, you've got your college tuition, college accounts taken care of, your savings account, all of those things.
Yeah.
If you have extra cash and you already have those things taken care of, that tends to gravitate towards the private market. Well, if the extra cash is no longer there, guess what? That's going to affect people's participation, especially as angels and as individual investors.
Yeah, that's good context that folks can understand broadly how to anticipate what venture and funding is going to look like. You know, not to belittle what's happening, but I think a reframe to help us all who are entrepreneurs, investors, keep our sanity is that this is a refining period, and so much good and innovation can come out of chaos, right?
Yeah.
And it's really going to show like who are the entrepreneurs who are able to stick with it. So that's what this correction will do. So wrap us up. What are the quick recap key points?
So the quick recap is who knows how long this is going to last. I think that has everything to do with its total impact. If somehow a bunch of very important, very wealthy folks get on a plane and travel down to Mar-a-Lago this weekend and start talking to President Trump and saying, hey, this is the impact it's having, and I think long-term this isn't a great idea. What if we did X, Y, or Z? And we start coming up with some strategies that are a little less heavy-handed, then the impact will be minimized, right? The stock market will creep its way back. You know, we won't see that huge inflationary, effect in the economy, and things would normalize. If it's protracted, then let's go back to what we talked about before, which is think about how you save cash. Think about how you spend less. Think about how you try to be as durable as humanly possible. So I don't know if that was helpful or not, or if it was just depressing as hell, but either way, that's the episode for today. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.